going out. Oh shoot, we're broadcasting.
Yeah, I said I had to entertain the people for a bit, so I started playing some music.
Yeah, I never have Wi-Fi issues, but today it's just decided that it wants to come on live.
It's 2020, that's why.
You know, it really is just the time right now. So let me just give me a second, everyone. Welcome.
Oh man, we can't hear you.
Let us know.
I have to start typing in questions because we keep going out.
Yeah. So I'm hoping I have a stable connection finally. This has never happened to me. But you know, crazy times right now. Yeah, so please slide into chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. And we'll get started in just a second. Brooklyn in the house, yes. Pittsburgh. I love it.
Came here for jokes.
Stockton. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you all for joining us. You know, there's a million things folks could be doing. It's rough out there right now. Thank you so much. And Andrea, thank you again for taking your time. I know there's a lot going on. Well, did someone coming in from Jamaica? Wow. All right.
She and I are both Trini Jamaican. We both to the new school, so it's like, she's a dope singer.
Ooh, we have to find out who you are. All right.
Okay, wow, I can't believe you're awake.
Right. It's about bedtime, huh? So my name is Dimitri Broxton. I'm the Senior Director of Education at Museum of the African Diaspora. Before we get started on today's program, I just want to acknowledge the very difficult, trying times that we're in right now. I know everyone's overwhelmed, feeling sad, feeling traumatized. But you know, it's also a time of hope. It's really great to see so much action happening. People are mobilizing in ways that they've never mobilized before in the past, or at least that's my perception of it. You know, I've never seen folks coming out in droves on an international scale around civil rights and Black lives. I want to start off by acknowledging those who have, those whose lives have been taken, that sparked what's going on in our world right now. I want to start off with saying the names of Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, and of course, George Floyd. I also want to acknowledge everyone that we've lost to state-sanctioned violence over, not even years, decades, but really centuries. And it's really, timely that we're speaking with Andrea Chung right now, whose work deals with these issues in such a profound way. We're doing these programs every single Wednesday at 1:00. Check Moad's website to find out about In the Artist Studio. As you can guess, our building is closed right now due to the global pandemic, but we thought it was really important to continue to bring artists to you on a weekly basis. And these are some of our favorite artists that we've worked with over the years, and some of them we haven't. So if you are new to Andrea Chung, she was born in '78 in Newark, New Jersey, and currently now lives and works. Let me tell that part. We're the same age, so it's all good. It's all good. We look good for our age. 40 is the new 20, so. Andrea lives and works in San Diego, California. She received a BFA from Parsons School of Design in New York and an MFA from Maryland Institute of College of Art in Baltimore. Her recent Biennale and museum exhibitions include Prospect 4, New Orleans, and the Jamaican Biennale in Kingston, Jamaica, as well as the Chinese American Museum and California African American Museum in Los Angeles and the San Diego Art Institute. Chung was a featured artist in MOAD's Spring 2019 exhibition, Coffee, Rum, Sugar, and Gold, a post-colonial paradox, curated by Dexter Wimberly and Larry Osei-Mensah. She was also one of the artists who generously donated artwork to MOAD's recent Diaspora United auction. And we thank her for that. In 2017, her first solo museum exhibition took place at the Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego. You broke the ocean in half to be here. She has participated in national and international residencies, including the Vermont Studio Center, McCall Center for Visual Arts, Headland Center for the Arts, and Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Her work has been written about in the Art File magazine, New Orleans Times, the Picayune, ArtNet, the Los Angeles Times, and International Review of African American Art, amongst many, many others. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing? Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, today is okay. I mean, nobody that I know of, or I haven't seen anything from, like, I mean, every day is kind of stressful because it's like you don't know if someone's gonna die at the protests. So I'm just glad that nothing happened last night, because Monday I was pretty pissed off. I'm part of like an art mom group that we meet up every Monday. I was pissed. Like, it was right after Trump said his little bullshit speech and then went to the church, and I was just like, it took everything in me to not like take my computer and smash it. Just, it's incredibly frustrating. But you know, nobody's gotten hurt today. There are more protests popping up here, which is surprising, but also questionable in a lot of ways. Like, I'm starting to wonder if some of these are popping up in areas that I don't know of any Black people living there, and they're like rich neighborhoods that I think are just trying to protect themselves. So kind of really frustrating to know what's actually like what people's real opinions are. So yeah, that's frustrating. My husband has to self-quarantine right now because he had to expose himself to family members. It's just like a lot going on right now. Angry little 7-year-old having a fit right now, supposedly doing his schoolwork. He may bust in here at some moment, but yeah, today's a lot. Today's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's been a lot to be a person of color in America for a very long time. Just right now, with everything compounded upon it itself, it's just been really difficult all around. I feel like I spent all Monday morning just crying, you know, just needing to release from that.
Not water. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
In like that kind of year, this is not water, because it's just, I can't bring myself to cry yet because I'm trying to fight it real hard. But, you know, I worry about my son, and like, I don't even know what to do about school. You know, it's like basic things like that. And with the virus and the protests, how do you explain that? You know, like, I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, you know, the virus is bad enough. Like, I live in the hood here. This is like the nicest hood I've ever lived in. I live in the hood. Like, I lived in Baltimore, and like, this is freaking nice compared to Baltimore. But like, I live in a food desert. There was hardly any testing in my neighborhood for a really long time. But I actually saw people wearing masks, which was reassuring. But we're still dying at an incredibly high rate. And I live in a predominantly Black and Mexican neighborhood. So with the protests, like, it was frustrating. I was like, damn, are we not dying fast enough for y'all? Like, what more do you want? And, you know, like, he goes to a Black and brown school. You know, when school starts up, I mean, I'm not seeing him unless there's a vaccine, but when school starts up, how many of his friends are going to have lost somebody? you know, and how's that going to like affect their behavior in school, their ability to learn? You know, it's just, I don't think people like consider those things when all of this is happening. So it's just been really hard, and so far my main focus has been him and like how to take care of him and how to get him to have some resilience, because he's a real sensitive kid that like absorbs everything, and it's finding a way to like, I don't want to shelter him, but also I'm not taking to him a protest so that he can get shot up or rubber bullets or anything like that. Like I want him to understand what's happening, but I don't want to break him. And it's so easy for a child to be broken watching this on TV. So it's been very challenging in that sense.
I hear you also have young ones, and you know, I've just been following their lead on the whole thing and just trying to figure out, you know, what information they want to know. It's just, yeah, it's just trying times all around. And you know, as an artist, you know, how is this impacting your ability to produce? I mean, you were prior to this whole quarantine and shelter in place and everything that's been going on, you were busy, very, very active. Has that shifted for you?
Definitely. I mean, like the last 2 years, I haven't had time to really work in the studio. Everything has been very project based, and I haven't had time to make what I want to make. And then I was in the armory, and that was like the highest of highs. I was like, oh shit, my career is taking off. Fuck, we got a pandemic. I was like, God damn it, 2020, you won't let me be great. So it was like a huge adjustment to like, I was like, damn, it's happening. And then it's like not slowly happening. I had to put everything on pause. That was like, you know, I mean, it put me in a good position that like I got paid to where if my husband loses his job, we have a little bit of something to continue to pay our mortgage. But he also he has a federal job. And with this ding dong that's president, they've been having so many, you know, like government shutdowns that puts his job in jeopardy. So there is no job security with a federal job anymore. So he's constantly like on high alert, high stress of, are we going to be able to pay our bills this year? So I'm very grateful for my gallery taking me to the armory so that, you know, we just happen to have a good year there, and I'm able to save and put away some money so that worst case scenario, he loses his job, we have enough money to pay a couple months of rent, and then not rent but mortgage, and then we're like up shit's creek. So you know, that I mean, like a show that I was supposed to be in at the Addison Museum in Andover got postponed. So that was sort of like a bummer because they were really great to work with. And we were mid-install and just everything shut down. And it's postponed to September, but I can't really see it ever opening up because it's on a high school campus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I can't see that ever, you know, reopening. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen. And it's really unfortunate because I loved the staff a lot. They've been great. They check in with me, you know, through all of this. And it was the largest sculpture that I had ever made to date. And it's just like sitting there now. Like, fruition. So it kind of sucks. But I'm glad it was them of all institutions. You know, I'm glad that it was a good institution that like I would love to continue to work with. They've been super cool and flexible and really, really great to work with. So yeah, I mean, everything is sort of on pause, but this was my year to just work. Like I had no other plans for the rest of the year because I was like, I need a break. I need to work. I need to do something that I want to do. And I had not planned to do anything else but work for the year. And then I had a show scheduled for next year. But other than that, you know, I was just like, let me just take a break. I was supposed to go to a residency in Cyprus.
Ooh, oh my goodness. Wow.
It was
I
like,
hope that still happens.
I
I
was like,
hope that still could happen for you. Oh my goodness. I couldn't even imagine.
like, I was gonna really enjoy that. And I was gonna take my family. Yeah, that sucks. That one really sucks. I was supposed to take my mom, my aunt, my mother-in-law, and one of my friends. We were gonna go to Italy because my mom, for some reason, made me the designated person to take her around. Like I know anything. Like that shit went on pause. Like it just like literally we were supposed to go when the outbreak happened in Italy and it
Mm.
got bad and like all those things got postponed.
I'm
So
so glad you weren't there though, you know?
yeah, it made me the person like the itinerary planner. So I was like, yeah, we don't have to like reschedule this.
Exactly. Not going into the epicenter.
Yeah,
I think it's really
but yeah.
Allison just says in the comments, it will open at the Addison. They're determined. So I love that that's going to happen. You know, I know we don't know the timeline. You know, working at MOAD, we're constantly pushing our timeline to try to keep up.
Anyone has like a realistic timeline. Like I had a studio visit with Mokata yesterday, and she was just like, "Yeah, we're planning 18 months out," and I was just like, "Yeah, I really can't see anything starting, before that. Like, I'm certainly not going into a museum before January.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Well, I'm not trying to get sick. I can't see it happening until there is a virus, and unfortunately, I think life is going to be on pause for this long. And I think
Especially in the arts.
yeah, I mean, it's just everywhere, and like honestly, I almost think that the pause is necessary in more ways than one. That we really need to rethink this shit. This is not working. This is not working, and we need to rethink this. We need to rethink the way that we function as a society, and this is the best time for it.
I love it.
Although this is not talking about art, so like
not just talking about, but I think society as a whole is you're absolutely correct. I think everyone needs to re-examine, but especially the art world and the museum world, we really need to look inward and check ourselves and check that we're actually doing what we say we want to do, and elevating those artists that need to be elevated. Again, which is why I'm so glad to have someone like you, who I said in Instagram, you didn't agree, but Andrea, you are one of the most badass artists ever and human beings. I love how you always keep it real. You always say what you really mean. And you don't mince your words. And that's, I think that's kind of the movement that needs to happen. People need to stop focusing so much on trying to be politically correct and just be politically engaged and say what they really think. And you have been someone even before all this went down who I don't think you have edited your feelings about injustices, how you feel politically. That I think so many people, as they're trying to elevate their art career, they start to edit themselves so that they're acceptable to everyone, even the people that they don't agree with.
Started off that way. See, that was the thing. It's like I felt like I had to censor myself and be quiet in the beginning because I was really afraid of how that would affect my career. But I think once I had a child, I had a horrible curator tell me, like, call my child a distraction.
Oh.
Yeah. And I had postpartum depression at the time. I was at a residency and she called my child a distraction. And that shit cut to the bone because I was crushed. Like I had to go on medication and, like I really had to figure out and redefine my role as an artist, a woman, a mother, a wife. And for someone who was a woman to tell me that shit cut to the bone. And I think at that point, I was like, I think that being a parent has made me have zero fucks to give at this point. Like I understand that like there is more to my life than just being an artist. And I love to death what I do. Like I've lost a relationship with a parent because of what I do, because I love it that much. but I'll be damned if I censor myself at this point. And like the more successful I become, is the less fucks I have to give.
I love that. I love that.
I feel like I can be more of myself and true to who I am when I don't have to worry about offending somebody. And like it doesn't mean that I'm just gonna say anything to hurt someone's feelings or anything like that. Like I still try to be thoughtful, but I also am very tired of having to not be who I am for something that I love doing so much. And I don't want to teach my child to do that. You know, and my husband will call me out of my shit.
Good. Yeah,
So
yeah, we all need that.
I mean, I have two people in my household that keep me grounded and keep me in check and keep me in line. You know, like I can't be any other way. This is just who I am, and you either like it or you don't. Like you don't have to. I'm not for everybody, but
Mm-hmm.
this is how it's the only way I know to be.
I want to start getting into your artwork, and I'm really excited about it. So, let's see. I'm gonna start off with the brain coral. Is that a good start?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Am I sharing the right one? I don't know what this looks like on the other end. Okay. But yeah, you know, let's just jump. I want to jump right into your work. You know, I think like many people, I mean, I don't know if people, I noticed a lot of comments about the Armory show. So you weren't necessarily, your work wasn't focused necessarily on the cyanotypes at the Armory show. You did have a few in there, right?
Yeah, I had two really large pieces. So these pieces are 60 by 44, I believe.
Okay, so huge. And you know, I'm always really fascinated by artists that use so many materials to express their work. But I think some of the common ones for you are the cyanotype, coral, images from the natural botany and horticulture, historical images, sugar. Um, can you kind of like walk us through your choice of these materials, and then also the coral itself?
Okay. I have been using sugar since grad school. I When I went to grad school, I was kind of a hot mess. Like I got in and just realized that I wasn't a painter. I started off as a painter, self-declared painter, but like when I got there and I saw the way that my peers talked about painting, I was just like, this is not for me. Like I don't really give two shits about the history of painting, especially because it's coming from a very like Western canon, and I don't really care about the canon. I'm more interested in how painting has been used like internationally, worldwide, historically, not just from one little slice of the globe. Um, and I didn't have any money, to be quite frank. And we were like strictly on a ramen diet. My husband hadn't found a job in Maryland, and we just moved there after getting married. So I started just like dumpster diving with a friend of mine who did collage. And I started thinking about my family, and I had been asking my family members a lot about our history, and everything sort of came down to the material, and the material was sugar. Slaves were imported into the Caribbean for sugar. My grandfather came from China, and I had really been thinking a lot about like the idea of people as imported goods because they were dehumanized, and I had started using shipping pallets and painting various transliterations of his name um, from Chinese characters into English letters, sort of as a meditative um, experience in a way. And I was painting them in sugar. So that was sort of my first foray into sugar. And then my grandmother, I started looking personally at like my personal relationship with sugar. And my grandmother died having her second leg amputated from gangrene because she had diabetes. So the first thing that I did was cast my leg in sugar as a way to give it back to her to honor her labor. So I've always worked with this material, even before the person that I will not name has been used sugar to make that sculpture, because that's the number one question I get.
Oh no, are you serious? What?
Always. I've been using it before that debuted, which was incredibly frustrating to get asked that at every single artist.
Oh, I will never ever ask you that. I promise. I didn't even see the connection actually, but okay, all right.
Well, because her piece was particularly on the Caribbean laborers, and I talk about what I know, and my family is from the Caribbean, so how could I not talk about it? How could I not use the material? But it has always been a part of my practice, from since second semester of grad school. And one of my good friends, who is a sculptor, an amazing sculptor, taught me how to make my first sculptural piece. And she was the one who helped me cast my leg. Shout out Rachel, because I know you're watching. She's one of my best friends that I made while in grad school. And she helped me cast my leg out of sugar. And that's pretty much that was my first few steps into sculpture. So with these pieces in particular, I started doing cyanotypes because I was really interested in the history of photography in relationship to the Caribbean. And I met a great artist at the Headlands, Harold Mendez, who taught me how to do a cyanotype. He saw me casting glass bottles out of sugar, and he was like, it would be really dope if you put this in the sun on top of this photographic process and let the light go through, and what could you do with that? And I was like, yo, this is so cool. I want to work with this. I was pregnant at the time, so I was like, I can't really mess with chemicals right now. I'm gonna sit on it and wait. And then over the course of 4 years, I had been collecting all of these stories about lionfish and how they were invading the Caribbean. And I was like, oh snap, this would be a dope way to talk about colonialism. Because they're an invasive species that are now in the Caribbean and destroying everything, destroying ecosystems. And the only way that you can really stop it is to eat them. So I had, legit, that's really the only way. There are contests to sort of spear them, how many lionfish can you spear?
Wow.
And it's because the language that's used to describe them and other invasive species is very similar to the way that people talk about immigration. So I was really drawn to that. And also cyanotypes have been historically used to document nature. So Anna Atkins had used it to document seaweed and plants and stuff like that. But also cyanotypes were used to make blueprints. And I was fascinated with the idea of the planning that went into colonizing a space. Somebody had to design manacles. I found blueprints of slave castles. Someone had to design a slave ship that would carry a certain amount of bodies. So that was very fascinating to me. And I really got into the process of cyanotypes for that specific reason. And it was like a perfect match in a lot of ways, that it just worked out. So I had made this large installation with that, with the lionfish and just the whole process. So it's sort of like an immersive experience where it feels like you're underwater and sort of watching the transformation of these lionfish that are attacking each other. So from there, I wanted to continue to play with the cyanotypes, but this time I started looking at corals and the idea of coral bleaching. And I was trying to figure out a way to bleach it. And I had done all different processes where I would use soda ash to sort of bleach out the cyanotype. But I felt like I was losing the quality that I wanted. So I was like, well, I did an experiment where I tried to grow rock sugar on a piece of string. So then I sort of sped up the process by growing it on the paper. And I picked corals in particular because corals, although they are dying because of, man-made, global warming, they're also very regenerative, and they are a colony in itself, but they are able to rebuild themselves. So I wanted to show the process of this coral bleaching using this material, using sugar in a different kind of way because I've never used white refined sugar before. I usually use pure cane sugar that's been stripped of all the molasses and liquid. And I wanted instead to grow the sugar crystals onto the paper. So that's how these pieces sort of evolved. And, over the duration of the exhibition, the sugar was still really wet. So you would see the sugar start to sort of crystallize and get harder, and it had this sort of like glimmering, glittery effect to it. But then also shards, the sugar would continue to fall off. So I really love the way the gallery framed these works. They collected the sugar that had all fallen off and put it within the frame, which I thought was like a really beautiful way to sort of capture that. And my gallerist is really, really into crystals. So I took a lot of those crystals and I had her place them around the gallery because she's really into energy. So I wanted her to place them in places that she felt carried a certain specific amount of energy in the gallery. So that was like a fun sort of little collaborative thing to do with her. But yeah, I was totally stressed out when doing these, but because I was like, oh my God, my first solo show. What am I going to do? It's a September show. I was like freaking out. And
you're experimenting.
Yeah, it's like, this is not the time to experiment. Like everyone thinks that like you have this grand scheme plan. It's like, nah, man, we be crying all the time. But I had a really great studio visit with yet another artist that I met at the Headlands, Samira Amin, and she helped me like get that shit together. And she actually drove down from LA to help me physically make the pieces. So I was happy with how these pieces worked out. And it's definitely something I want to continue to sort of play with. Like, I don't think I'll ever deviate from cyanotypes. I think it's
love it.
It's so much fun. There's so many ways to use it that like it's an endless experimentation. And I love working with ephemeral materials, and cyanotypes are also ephemeral, even though you're capturing a photographic image. Over the course of time, if you expose it to light, it'll turn completely white. And I like that element of time in all of my work. And I like that the work doesn't necessarily last. I don't think that all artwork needs to last. I think that there can be its own history and its own life. And it's also kind of my way of giving the finger to the art market in a lot of ways. You can buy it, but it doesn't mean it's going to last forever. But I still keep your check.
I love it. I actually, as you're talking about that, it just made me realize I want to, shift to this piece that you did at MOAD. And are you able to see that on your screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so, just kind of talking about ephemerality, the piece that you did at MOAD, you were very clear that this piece was not made for the art market. You had no intention of allowing anyone to purchase this. And, I just think as an artist, that's revolutionary. There's very few artists that are not thinking about the art market as they approach their work. Can you talk about this piece?
This is probably my favorite installation I've ever made. Because it was so much fun to do. You guys are one of my favorite institutions to work with. And I'm not just saying that because you paid me very well. I'm saying that because you had a really highly professional staff that was like just on point. And it was so much fun to do this project. Emily is a really great curator to work with. I feel bad. I got sugar all over her apartment. The story behind that is that the Airbnb she booked me into ended up not having a stove, which was weird. So I first started cooking in her apartment and spilled sugar all over her apartment and was burning sugar left and right. But so they moved me to another Airbnb, and I went through I think 100 pounds of sugar, which is the most I've ever done.
Wow.
And it was just a fun process. And I kind of went in thinking that I was going to do a piece. I was thinking about the phrase, I swear on a stack of Bibles, and really thinking about how religion has been used to justify slavery, and also how religion has, like, the complication of it, not only being used to justify slavery and colonization, but also as a source of community, and how people were able to get through it. That it's not just this black and white thing; it's very complicated, and also how people were able to bring over aspects of their traditional religion and mask it in Catholicism, for example. So Voodoo is based on, masking, traditional African religion with Catholicism. So, like, I don't ever want to make something very black and white. I'm more interested in the gray that's in between it. So I was gonna stack all the Bibles, but I was like, shit, I don't know if I'm gonna get through all of it. I don't have a whole lot of time. So when I came to install, I was laying everything out just so I could see what I had. And I took a quick picture of it and sent it to my husband. And he was like, I really like how this looks. It looks like evidence. And I was like, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. So then I was just like, I'm going to leave it like this. And I liked that some of the sugar had burned when I was at Emily's apartment. And that I think I've used sugar so much now that I know how to play with the temperatures, and I can manipulate how fast it melts. I've been able to do things like embed things within the sugar now. So like some of the Bibles here have beads that represent the various orishas that were masked with saints that are in there. And then I was also really fascinated with the stories of women in Brazil who would hide grains of rice in their hair. So some of that is embedded in there. Different herbal teas and remedies that people were able to identify once they came to the so-called New World. I embedded those in there. And then I was also really interested in how religion's been used to sort of twist the government, even though it's supposed to be, separation of church and state. So you see the gavels there, and also how religion's been used to justify homophobia. So I found some hymnal books when I was in San Francisco, and I just sort of experimented by pouring the sugar on top of some of the pages and like twisting it around. And then some of the Bibles I dipped the sheet music, like Amazing Grace, which is very significant in the Black community. I embedded it in the sugar. And then some of the Bibles I just twisted to sort of talk about how religion's been used to like vilify people. But it was like just a really fun project to work on. And I like going into a space and not necessarily knowing exactly what I'm going to do, because it still leaves room for a lot of play. And this was really fun to play around and sort of.
It was also just fun for us because, I don't know if it was part of the process, but the darker the sugar was, where you burnt it, which just gave all these lovely textures of color over time. So this photograph that we're looking at was pretty early on, but as time went past, it just started to melt together until I don't even know if parts of it actually melted off of this platform at all, but it's just melting everywhere. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, definitely intentional. Like I want people to come in and see the work at the inception, and like continue to come back and watch. It's a durational thing. Like anything that I do with the sugar is durational, and that you need to revisit it over and over again to see how things sort of kind of bleed into each other, because I think that's just pretty much how life works, that things seep into one another and alter your perspective on things. So, I try to somehow visually do that with all the sugar pieces.
Yeah, it was just powerful to watch, and so interesting to see the pieces, and then to just find out, you also, I remember you talking about also kind of like ripping the pages out of the Bible, almost like redacting certain sections that talked about liberation of people from slavery as well.
Yeah, there's something called a slave Bible, where they would redact a lot of parts of the Bible that refer to freedom and how nobody should be a slave. And I thought it was really interesting that slave masters went to the effort of redacting so much of the Bible and then giving it to the slaves in order to make them like good niggers, to say, you know, like that's a lot of effort. And it goes back to you know, my interest in colonization and the effort. There's so much effort that is put into oppressing people. It's like, damn, that's so much work. Like, why are you doing all that work? Just, it would be so much easier if you just treat us like equal human beings. It's so much effort. Like, I am fascinated with the levels that people will go through to oppress people. You know, like, don't you have a job? Like, what? Why are you doing all of this? Why are you doing all this? It would take you less effort to treat everyone with kindness and love than it would be to, like, you know what, let me go through this really thick, dense book and redact everything in here that mentions freedom and how slavery is terrible.
Yeah, and I think it really speaks to the time that we're currently living in. You know, I love that you're bringing that to the present, because, you know, especially this last week, it's very clear that this history never really ended. You know, we made some steps towards progress, but we've never really progressed. And I think, you know, this is where art becomes this powerful tool of just showing us, you know, you have this very elegant way of just showing us this is this history that you guys think is hundreds of years old and may not be relevant right now. This is how it's relevant today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to go to the dome piece or if we want to zoom up to the current pieces that you've been working on.
It is entirely up to you. I can.
Well, I do want to know a little bit more about this piece as well. Oh, my screen is a little.
This is at the Addison Museum. It's not quite finished. But the piece is based off their maps collection, and they brought me up there a few times to look at their collection on nautical maps. And I was really fascinated with the sea monsters that were like drawn on the maps. They were like really ridiculous, and like the images of what they thought a whale looked like in translation were hilarious. And they would have drawings of natives in a lot of the places that the ships, all European-based ships, would go to. They would show like people eating arms, and it was just so ridiculous. And they were hilarious. They were like so incredibly ignorant that I couldn't do anything but laugh. And I was really fascinated with the fact that a lot of them were used as warnings for either rough waters or to like warn sailors of the natives in the area that they may eat you. And I it's so stupid, but I was so fascinated by it. Like the ridiculousness of it was entertaining to me. And I always try to have like humor in my work and my process because I'm just an idiot. So I was like, damn, we didn't have any kind of warning. What if we had a warning? What if we had some kind of like warning of what was to come, that people were gonna throw people up in a boat and like dehumanize them, throw them off ships, murder mothers, rape women, and bring them to all these places that they knew nothing about, strip them of their language, their culture, their history, their families. Like, what if we had warning for that? What would that look like? How would our lives be different? So this piece is called the Westerlies, and the Westerlies are basically trade winds. And you know, what if we had the ability to read these signs and constellations? So I wanted this piece to function like a portal, so that when you go in, it's a portal that's like a planetarium. You go inside, and there are constellations in the shape of the trade winds. And as you step inside, there's for the lack of a better word, shelf on the inside that looks like water, so that the sky and the water feel like they blend in together. And then the trade winds are projected into the sky, and they move around. And then there will be, because it's not all put together, like some clear boats, resin boats that are in the water. And there'll also be a sound element where you hear the sound of children. I recorded my son, so he's kind of saying, "Look over there, look at that. Did you see that?" So that we're looking to the sky and seeing these warnings and just trying to imagine what would that look like what would our lives as people of color, because we aren't the only ones who were colonized.
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like had we had that warning? What could our lives be like? So I would really like to finish this piece and see it come to life. With that damn,
oh my goodness, we all would.
damn corona. And like the outside of it is all cyanotype. So I managed to find someone who sells chemicals already embedded into the fabric. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Wow.
So I printed all of these in a fabricator's yard. They had like this huge open space. So all of it is cyanotypes.
And are you still using it are you exposing it using the sun or using lights?
Same method. And
wow.
I experiment by like throwing, you can salt on the cyanotype chemicals. You can spray hydrogen peroxide. There's like a lot of different processes you can do in order to get different textures and colors and things like that. So by making those earlier pieces, the installation, the lionfish, I was able to sort of take everything I learned from that and transfer it onto the fabric.
Wow. So in this, you're not actually using large negatives. You actually created all the marks that we see.
Yeah, it's all freestyle. It's
wow.
all freestyle.
Okay, everybody does need to see this. This is very necessary. I'm glad that the Addison is still committed to having this show up because yes, we all need to see this. This is incredible. And again, shows another dimension to what you do. Is there any sugar in this piece?
I had thought about making the boats out of sugar, but like it just got too complicated with like anything liquid. Like a lot of institutions are afraid.
especially liquid sugar, right? They're afraid of rodents coming in, right?
No water, and they were like, "Yo, slow down." Who's gonna? I was like, "All right, you're right. Let me find a different solution." But they're excellent. Like they're super patient, and because this was, like I said, the largest project I've ever done, and it was just very different. A lot of it had to do with like outsourcing people to make things, which was its own headache, and also just figuring out how to transfer your ideas into language so that someone else can build for you is a very difficult skill. Project managing is not like my strong suit. I'm doing everything myself. So it's definitely a challenge, but they're great to work with. They were incredibly patient where I may not have been. If I was a curator, I've been like, look, you need to get your shit together. They were like,
I mean, I'm sure that they have seen what you can do, and so that there's a complete faith in your ability to pull it off and to execute, which clearly you do. I just want to tell everyone who's a participant with us on Zoom, sorry, I know there's people on Facebook and on YouTube live now as well. We're not necessarily able to manage those, at least for this component, but for those of us who are here on the Zoom, I encourage you now, we're going to talk about a couple more pieces and then we're going to shift to your questions. So please slide into the Q&A section of Zoom and please add your questions and I'll go through them in just a few minutes. Before we get to that, I want to get to some of the more recent pieces, which, I'm a bead artist. So anyone working with beads just does it for me. I'm obsessed, and I'm trying currently to figure out how I can get my hands on one of these pieces, just to be honest. And so I believe this is one of your pieces that's still in process right now, right?
Yeah, I'm still working on it now. I think I sent you the most recent photo where you can see the needles sticking out.
Let me see if I can find that one.
So I'll just like briefly talk about these. I had a lot of these at the Armory. I've been doing some collages for a little while, and like a lot of them were sort of like more exercises for me
Let's shift to
when
this
I
one then.
when I would get stuck, honestly. My husband was like, can't figure out an idea. What if she go make those little collages? It might help you. And I was like, all right. And so they sort of took a life of their own. And I work with a lot of archival images. And after having made them for a bit, I noticed that like a lot of the women in the collages look really pissed off, like they didn't want their picture taken. It's like, yo, why is this white photographer in my face? And a lot of these images are the images for this particular series are ethnographic photos that were taken by white photographers and put on postcards and sort of like mass produced and disseminated all over the world to sort of to keep that stereotype of what Black people were like in Africa, like sort of like the savage, using that idea to as a excuse to civilize them. So I was really fascinated by the fact that they all looked angry. So this series is called Vex, which is a term that we use in the Caribbean when someone is mad. You'll say she vex. So I was just like, all right, well, I'm going to use these images. These women had no idea how their bodies were going to be reproduced and mass distributed to people without their permission and not understanding the circumstances of how those images would be used. So I thought a lot about ninkisis. And for those who don't know, ninkisis are fetishes that have nails driven into them, and the more nails that are in the ninkisi, the more powerful it becomes. So I wanted to obscure the viewer's ability to get close to them. So I wanted to sort of interrupt their image, your ability to see anything, to be able to have access to their culture, their beauty, their femininity, just anything about them. You don't have permission to do that without asking. So I drove as many needles as I could into their images and beaded them with the colors of the two orishas that protect women, which is Yemeya and Oshun. So that's sort of like the idea behind this series of work that I've done. And all of the imagery are offerings to those two orishas. So like the flowers, the colors of the flowers, the numbers and the beads, they are all tributes to those orishas and to these women.
So absolutely gorgeous and stunning. The particular botany that you're referencing, so that also has connections.
Yeah. So I looked at a lot of like altar pieces that have been made, and I looked at a lot of the flowers that were used to create an altar to pray to those orishas. So marigolds are very present, and then I also used plants that are specific to specific regions. So plants that you might find in Africa, or plants that you might find in the Caribbean, because our stories are, intertwined.
I think there's also this really fascinating. I'm a plant collector, right, myself right now, and I'm really deeply into houseplants of the tropics and kind of thinking of where they come from. And so, yeah, I love that you're also bringing in that these plants originate in somewhere like West Africa, the Caribbean, and now they're starting to find their way into this very high-priced plant market that's going on right now.
And then also like a lot of plants that you'll see in the Caribbean in particular are not indigenous to the region. They were brought there, and it's sort of like a myth that they're native to the island. So a lot of palm trees are not native to the Caribbean, like the royal palm.
Yes.
I mean, if you really look at I'm very fascinated with foodways and the traveling of plants to from one location to the next, and how that's sort of impacted the land and as well as the people. So like one of the next projects that I've been thinking about doing, it sort of revolves around that idea.
All right, and then we have another one that looks like it's in process as well. What's the ground that you're using? You're able to see this?
handmade paper that I made at the Women's Studio Workshop. It's all paper that I made out of birthing cloths that were used by midwives.
Wow. Wow. All right. So you're adding a whole other layer, even in the choice of the ground that you're using. You're intentionally not just using artist paper.
No, it's all. I really fell in love with paper making. I love the tactility of all of it, and I also had a lot left over. So there, that like I'm being real. I had a whole lot of it left over. But a lot of the work that I made about midwives and motherhood, I used materials from that. So I would macerate the birthing cloths and make it into paper so that I could work on that base. And I always married the two orishas with all of the midwife work that I did, because Yemeya is the orisha of motherhood and a protector of women and children. And she's of the sea. And Oshun is the orisha of love, and also overlooks women and is a protector of women. So those two things sort of translated to this body of work also.
That's so incredible.
Oshun, so it just like child of Oshun, so I was like try to sneak it in there somehow.
There you go. There you go. I love it, and it adds another layer to your work. I'm gonna shift to questions because we have a few minutes left. Like all these other artists that we've been in conversation with, I'm like, I want to talk to you for 2 more hours, please.
It's not like I got
some So our friend Rula Cycly has a question in the Q&A. Thanks for offering this program, Moad and Andrea. I'm wondering if you could speak briefly about your 2017 installation at the California African American Museum. That was this is Rilla speaking. That was my first exposure to your work, and it really shaped my thinking about diaspora, cultural overlap, and creative practice.
So that piece was sink or swim. It was an installation of sugar bottles that were suspended from the ceiling, and they had fishing tackle attached to them. I did a Fulbright in Mauritius, which is a small island nation in the Indian Ocean. And I went there specifically because they have a very similar history to the Caribbean. My Chinese family is Hakka, and the Chinese that are there are also Hakka. And the food is also very similar to the Caribbean because they had Indian indentured servants and Chinese indentured servants brought to Mauritius once slavery was abolished, and it passed through several hands. It went from Dutch to French to British. And I was really fascinated with a village there called the Morn that is known as being predominantly Black. And their perception of Black people there is very similar to the perception of Black people here. They're savages, they're lazy, etc. And in Lemourne in particular, there were slaves, Maroons, who established a village on top of Mount Lemourne. And when slavery was abolished, they all jumped off the cliff. The British had sent troops to tell them that they were, free. And they all jumped off out of fear.
Wow.
And those that did survive took up fishing as a trade because they refused to do, you were supposed to do 7-year, I forget what it's called. You're supposed to work for an additional 7 years for your former slave master in order to help the economy because they had now lost their free labor. And, a lot of them were like, fuck that, I ain't gonna work for you. Like, why? So they took up fishing, and I have that as being a very revolutionary act. So the bottles are, there's a particular way of fishing called bottle fishing, line fishing, where you take your line and you wrap it around the bottle, cast it into the water, and then you and pull up the line. So that particular group, they're called Creoles, are that trade is tied to their culture. And it was something that became a very generational trade, and people look down on. And I thought that I wanted to sort of honor and acknowledge that number. But also the fishing trade is dying out because foreign ships are coming into their waters and stealing all their fish. So for the duration of the exhibition, the bottles are cast and strung up, and then over time they slowly melt and drip to sort of reflect the appearance of their trade.
Wow. That's wild. I'm pulling it up. I could only find the image with your photograph in it, so I just wanted to kind of pull that up for folks to be able to see a sense of what that looks like. Let's see. Tasha says, "Hey, girl, I always love hearing Andrea talk about her work. What are some of the memorable reactions you have had to your work?"
I think seeing at Moad, seeing Isaac Julian looking at my work made me lose my shit. Absolutely love his work. And I mean, like, I saw 10,000 Waves here in San Diego, and that shit blew my mind. Like, I hate video. Sorry. I hate video work. That shit blew my mind. I had never seen anything like that before in my life. It was absolutely amazing and stunning, and I just could not imagine my brain working the way that his brain works. For anyone who hasn't seen, it's this incredible video piece that's about an hour long, and it's all projections, but there are 9 different projections that are in different positions all around the room, and the videos and the music is all synced together that it splashes onto another screen. It is by far the most amazing video I've ever seen in my life. And for him to like my work just blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, like this is unfucking believable. It meant a lot to me. I mean, I don't get to go to my shows because I live so far away. I'm not like in New York or in LA or anything like that. So I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm also terrible at openings. I'm not good at receiving compliments. It's very awkward. So yeah, that's a hard question to answer.
I mean, I think, yeah, seeing Isaac Julian love your work, man. I don't know if it gets any better than that.
I'm waiting for a conversation with Janine, because like the piece that I did with the soap hands, that was all an homage to her and her lick and lather piece, because I love that work so much. So yeah, I love Janine. Yeah. And she's Caribbean. So I was like,
yes, gotta keep that going. I have time for one more question from the audience, and this is from Kristen Becker. How involved do you want the museum wall text or other materials available to dive into all the nuances of your work? Or do you prefer to have people do some of that investigation on their own?
I definitely want people to do the work. And I have had the experience of wall text often being wrong anyway. And I don't want to blow up anybody's spot, but when I was in PS1, somebody looked at me as Black and Japanese. I was like, Chung is not even a Japanese last name. Like, I don't even know how to, but it was all kinds of wrong. And then like I think that a lot of times when wall text is written about my work, they only make it about slavery. And that's not my focus. Like that's not necessarily what I'm thinking about when I'm making this work. It can't be separated from the topics that I'm bringing up. But really, I mean, it's all you can come up with. Is such a basic way of, that's some basic bitch shit, really. Like, you can't just look at somebody's work who's Black and like debase it that way. You know, there's room for that, but that's not what my work is about. And the fact that you're too lazy to even think about writing it in a different way says more about you, the institution, and the curator, and whoever's writing this copy than it does about me. So I don't like too much text because it's oftentimes incorrect, and you're essentially telling the viewer what to think. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm more interested in how, like, a very visceral response to the work. One of my favorite pieces, well, not my favorite, but one of the most like difficult pieces I've ever done was about my relationship with my dad. And when it was written about, it was written in a way that sort of made it about slavery. And I was like, this is not about slavery. I was like, this is about my fucked up relationship with my dad. Like, I don't know how you went that direction. But yeah, like I think that there needs to be more thought in how we write about work. And not just, I don't want to just put the blame on curators, but also critics. Do your
Mm-hmm.
homework, like do your homework. If you're going to write about an artist, actually read about them before you do that and really look at the work. And unfortunately, I don't think that happens often enough.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I just saw in Hyperallergic Steph Rodney, which I appreciated this last week, his article about what I got wrong last year. So yeah, I definitely think art critics, museum professionals, curators, stop and do your homework. But if you get it wrong, admit that you got it wrong.
The other
And then
thing
also just
I think that people also need to remember when you're looking at this work, you need to think about who's writing it, what their baggage is, where their biases may lie, the institution that it's in, what their baggage, their past. I think you need to really consider the space in which the work is being shown. And I think with everything that's happening now, I think you really need to think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely talk to the artist if you have questions. I think it's as simple as that. We are definitely at our time right now. And Andrea, I just thank you so much for taking this time with us today, considering everything that you have going on. I think this conversation has been valuable. This is adding to the conversation that our nation and our world is having right now. And I wish you the best of luck in all these shows that you have coming up soon and residencies.
They all on pause, but they will continue.
It will continue. And then I think I saw someone put a link to the Cloud and Man gallery in here as well. And then I do want to plug your website as well.
Go to Cloud and Man. My joint is not updated. I need to find somebody for me because I hate doing it. Yes, please go support Cloud and Man. I love my dealer, amazing woman, supporter of POCs, has gone way above and beyond what she needs to do to support me. So I highly suggest someone support her.
Beautiful. And folks can go there to purchase your work, right?
Sally Lowe's not gonna get rid of my ass, so like, please go buy some work. Lowe's ain't going away.
I love it. I love it. Well, you have a beautiful rest of your day. And just so everyone knows, this conversation will be available on MOAD's YouTube channel. So look up Museum of the African Diaspora and please share it out. Thank you. And I'll see everyone next week. All right.
Bye.